This isn't Henry. Neither is this, or this, or this, because the villain you think you've been watching isn't who you believe he is. And there's one small detail hidden in Season 5 that reveals exactly who Henry truly is. Once you notice it, you'll never see Vecna the same way again. Ever since Season 5 dropped, fans have been throwing around the names Henry, Vecna, 001, and the Mind Flayer like they're all the same thing. But here's the shocking truth: they aren't. And understanding the difference between who Henry actually was and what he became completely rewrites the story. Before we get to that one visual clue that changes everything, you need to understand just how deep this identity confusion really goes. Because once you break it down, things get absolutely wild. When we see 001 in the Hawkins lab with 11, most people assume that's Henry Creel. When Vecna is torturing Max in the Upside Down, fans say that's Henry. And when the Mind Flayer appears as that massive shadow entity, many believe that's also Henry pulling the strings. But here's the reality: none of those are actually Henry. And the proof of who Henry really is comes down to something so obvious that almost everyone missed it. It all begins in 1959 when the Creel family moves to Hawkins. And this is where most people misunderstand the story. Henry didn't suddenly develop powers or turn evil in that house. He already had the Mind Flayer inside him before they ever arrived. The Mind Flayer had already chosen him, already infected him, already begun the takeover. The house wasn't where Henry became a monster. It was where he tried to fight the monster and failed. The real Henry Creel, the boy with his own thoughts, emotions, and identity, spent years resisting the Mind Flayer's influence inside his own mind. He fought it constantly, but the Mind Flayer is ancient, relentless, and patient, and eventually Henry lost. The moment he stopped resisting, 001 was born, and this distinction is critical because 001 is not Henry. 001 is the Mind Flayer's power fused with Henry's body, memories, and subconscious traits. It looks like Henry, it remembers Henry's life, it even mimics parts of his personality, but the mind making the decisions is no longer Henry Creel. It's the Mind Flayer wearing Henry like a disguise. Once you understand that, you start getting closer to where Henry actually is. So when we see 001 manipulating 11 in the lab, teaching her, bonding with her, that isn't Henry reaching out, that's the Mind Flayer using Henry's memories to appear human. It knows how to behave because it has access to Henry's entire life. Meanwhile, the real Henry, his consciousness, his soul, has been buried so deep that he barely exists within 001 at all. Then comes that moment in Season 4, when 11 destroys 001's body. It's twisted, burned, reshaped into the creature we now call Vecna. But what happened to the consciousness inside? This is where things get even darker. When 11 destroyed 001's physical form, she didn't just send him into the Upside Down, she pushed his consciousness into the hellscape. And in that place, the Mind Flayer no longer needed to pretend. It didn't need to mimic humanity or preserve Henry's personality, so it stripped away the 001 identity entirely and became something new, Vecna. At that point, 001 became nothing more than an echo, a discarded layer of the Mind Flayer's evolution. So let's lay out the layers clearly, because this is essential for understanding Season 5. There is Henry Creel, the original human boy. There is the Mind Flayer, the ancient entity. There is 001, the Mind Flayer controlling Henry's body and memories. And there is Vecna, the Mind Flayer's final form after consuming 001. 4 identities, 1 controlling consciousness, the Mind Flayer. But here's the question no one was asking. If the Mind Flayer took over Henry back in 1959, and if 001 was just a disguise, and if Vecna is the final evolution, then where did Henry Creel go? What happened to his consciousness? And how do we know we've actually seen him in Season 5? Here's the answer. Henry didn't disappear. He wasn't erased. He was trapped, and he's been hiding inside Vecna's mind this entire time. Using his memories, Henry created a hidden sanctuary, a pocket space inside the monster's consciousness, a place where the Mind Flayer's control weakens, a place where Henry has been quietly regaining strength and preparing to fight back. And the craziest part is that Season 5 gives us proof this is real. When Holly Wheeler goes missing, she isn't the only child taken. 3 other kids vanish too. We briefly see them when Will experiences a vision of Vecna's lair, but something is different this time. When Vecna takes Max, her mind is trapped in the red hellscape, reliving trauma, but Holly and the other children aren't there. They're somewhere else. In Will's vision, we see a protected area, a safe space that looks nothing like the usual upside-down nightmare. And that's where Holly's consciousness is. That's where the real Henry Creel is hiding. He's been shielding these children inside Vecna's mind, protecting them from the Mind Flayer's torment. But how do we know it's really Henry doing this and not Vecna pretending? This is where Max becomes the key. Max has been trapped inside Vecna's mind since Season 4. Her body is in a coma, but her consciousness still exists. In Season 5, we see her hiding in a cave-like space, not being tortured, but protected. Holly is kept in the same area. What's really happening is this. Henry is shielding Max inside Vecna's mind by using fear as a barrier. There is an internal war happening. The remnant of the 001 persona wants to consume Max completely, but Henry is using everything he has left to keep that corrupted version away from her. The Mind Flayer, as Vecna, is wreaking havoc in the Upside Down. The 001 fragment is hunting victims inside the mind, and Henry is fighting back from within, building safe spaces and using fear as a weapon against his own corrupted shell. Now here's the detail that changes everything. If this were just another manipulation, if Vecna were pretending to be a protector, one thing makes no sense at all. The figure protecting Holly is wearing 1950s era clothing, specifically the exact style Henry Creel would have worn in 1959. Holly is a child from the 1980s. If the goal was manipulation, why appear in outdated clothes that mean nothing to her? That makes no sense as a tactic, but it makes perfect sense if that figure is truly Henry, because he's appearing as the last version of himself he remembers before the Mind Flayer took over completely. Those clothes aren't a disguise. They're proof that this is Henry as he truly was, fully human, fully himself. The Mind Flayer spent years pretending to be human as 001. If it wanted to trick Holly, it would appear as someone familiar or comforting to her. The fact that it doesn't proves this isn't manipulation, it's honesty. And there's even more evidence. If Holly were under the Mind Flayer's control, wouldn't it isolate her, keep her confused, terrified, alone? But instead, Holly is allowed to meet Max. They can talk. They share the same protected space. Holly begins to understand what's really happening inside Vecna's mind. Vecna would never allow that. The Mind Flayer would never let its victims learn the truth. The only reason this happens is because Vecna isn't in control of that space. Henry is. And he wants them to understand. He wants them to know the difference between himself and the monster. The Mind Flayer spent decades consuming Henry, turning him into 001, then discarding that form to become Vecna. But it couldn't destroy Henry completely. And now, that last fragment of Henry Creel is fighting back, creating sanctuaries, protecting Max, shielding children, resisting the monster that stole his life. This is not Henry. That isn't Henry. And that definitely isn't Henry. But this is Henry. And Stranger Things Season 5 is setting up the final battle between the boy who was consumed and the monster that consumed him.